Okay, for the rest of this week, we're going to be doing some history. Now, history is when we find out about what happened in the past, and the people that do this are called historians. But how do historians find out about what happened in the past? Time travel might exist in things like Doctor Who, but in real life we can't go back in time and ask people what happened. So how do we find out about the past? The answer is sources. And by sources, I don't mean ketchup or barbecue sauce. In sources, history means something different. Sources are things that tell us about the past. Now, in school, you've already learnt about things that happened in the past, and I'm going to talk briefly about a couple of those things. We learnt about the Great Fire of London, which was in 1666, and we learnt about the moon landings, which were in 1969. Now, the way we know about these things are through sources, but there's a big time difference between these. The moon landings happened long after the Great Fire of London. So it's different kinds of sources that tell us about those things. So if you think back to earlier this year when we learnt about the Great Fire of London, we found out about it through sources including Samuel Pepys's diary. Okay, Samuel Pepys wrote about what happened and he kept it in a diary. And that tells us a large chunk of what happened. We also saw paintings, including the painting that showed St Paul's Cathedral being burnt down. We don't have videos of it happening because video cameras, phones, none of that had been invented then. So those are sources that tell us about the Great Fire of London. Moon landings, on the other hand, we don't need to look at paintings or old diaries to know about that. It happened much more recently. It was recorded, it was filmed, it was on television. There are still people alive, plenty of people alive, that remember it happening, including Buzz Aldrin, who was one of the people that went there. Okay? So sources are what tell you about the past, but we use different kinds of sources depending on when it happened. Now we're going to be looking at an event that was closer to this end of history than this end, okay? So it happened just over 100 years ago. Let's have a look at some sources. So this is source number 1. We've got a plan for a ship. It says plan for RMS Titanic. And then underneath it says plans from Harland and Wolff Shipyard, Belfast. And underneath you can see a picture of their plans. So that is source number 1. Source number 2 is a very fancy looking golden ticket. It says it's a ticket for Titanic for a first class passenger, and it's issued by White Star Line. And it says that it's sailing in 1912, the year 1912. So that's source number 2. Our next source, source number 3, is a recording of a distress signal sent from the Titanic. A distress signal is like a call for help. So this is what the distress signal says. Come at once, we have struck an iceberg and we are sinking fast. We are putting the passengers in small boats. Women and children first. So that's source number 3. Finally, we've got the front page of an American newspaper called the Boston Daily Globe. And this is from the 16th of April, 1912. Now the headline says that Titanic sinks and that sadly 1,500 die. Then it goes on to say that some were picked up and survivors were mostly women and children. So that is our final source, telling us about what we're going to be learning about. Okay, so using what we've learned from those sources, I want you to brainstorm what you've just found out. So in a box in the middle of a piece of paper, put the Titanic, and then around it you can start writing the things you've learned from these sources. So for example, I've included one thing from the sources about the Titanic, which we know that it hit an iceberg and sank. So can you brainstorm what you've learned from these sources?